So once again, a very warm welcome to everyone who is here with us for our webinar on psychological resilience in an era of chronic global uncertainty. My name is Sean Connor. I'm the Executive Director of the International Peace Bureau. For those that may not know us, we are an international network of peace organizations founded in 1891 and the Nobel Peace Laureate from 1910. We have around 400 organizations and 1,000 individuals as part of our network, a global network working for peace. With that said, we are, of course, very aware and oftentimes over committed in these moments of geopolitical upheaval, of global chaos and uncertainty. We see the world moving every day more and more into cycles of violence, destruction, competition, and threats even of nuclear annihilation. All of these concerns put us all in a very difficult place where on one hand, we want to do everything that we can to prevent war and the worst outcomes that war brings, and to fight for peace and justice on the global stage. These commitments, which are not only work commitments, but life commitments that we have, something we dedicate our lives to pursuing, can take a lot out of us physically, mentally, emotionally, especially as we see the world seemingly getting worse constantly. We are tempted a lot of the time to work long days into evenings, mornings, and to put everything we have into the movement that we have together, while often failing to acknowledge the toll that this can take on us, keeping track of everything that we see happening on the world, as well as our commitments and actions that we take. I can speak from personal experience, having suffered burnout several times in the past decade myself, and with many colleagues and those within our network expressing similar frustrations, difficulties, which can manifest into physical illness or even worse in many cases. We are very lucky to count on Esset Samatova, who we have with us today, an IPB council member, and also a Sean MacBride Peace Prize laureate, the prize that we give out, who is here today to give us basically an overview of both the psychology of this chronic uncertainty that we face, the costs that it has for us, but also practical tools and frameworks that we can use to survive and to thrive and to ensure that our movements and ourselves can be supported and cared for, even in these difficult moments. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Esset to begin the presentation for today. Esset, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to teach us all on this subject.
Hi, Sean. Thank you. My gratitude to all the participants who joined the webinar. Thank you for your interest, for your trust. So my name is Esset Samatova, and more than 10 years, I've been working at the intersection of psychology, mental health, and human rights. And I've been collaborating with International Peace Bureau since 2022, and I'm very grateful for this connection. And I really appreciate this opportunity to share with you my ideas and practically oriented tools, which may be helpful in current situation which we all have. So before we start, I think it's important to tell a bit about the idea, how did we came to the decision to provide this webinar. So the idea came to me because of the concern that has been growing in me over the last months. In recent years, we've been witnessing and suffering from the waves of direct and indirect attacks on human rights and civil society around the world. New wars, shrinking civil spaces, funding cuts, genocide, democratic backsliding, and the normalization of violence and cruelty. And of course, all of this affected and still affects us. And these pressures, they are dangerous, even if they are only external. But the thing which I started to notice that the change in human rights defenders' moods and attitudes. Like over time, step by step, this external pressure enters our nervous system and start to affect our moods, our attitudes, our relationships, our belief in the future. And this is the place where the danger becomes deeper, because if oppressive systems control only the external environment, we're still able to resist. But the thing is that if they also colonize our inner world, our attention, our hope, our sense of agency, then the damage becomes much harder to repair. And for me, as a psychologist, maybe as an expert in mental health, the mental health is the last frontier of freedom, and it's the space where dignity, meaning, and our moral choice remain possible. That's why I decided to prepare, I don't know, session or webinar which might be helpful to human rights defenders to deal or at least start to use some of the tools which can help us to overcome this current hardship. And in our webinar, I can't promise that all these tools will be useful. Maybe you will be able to take one, two, or all of them. Today we will talk about the 7 resilience principles, and each principle will be followed by the concrete practice or tool. So I can promise that after this webinar, everything will change for the better, and the world situation will change. But I hope that some of these tools or some of the principles or topics which we'll touch today will be useful, and you will take them with yourself. And about how do we organize this process? I think that the lecture part will last about 45 or 50 minutes. I will share my presentation with you. And after the presentation, you will have a chance to ask questions. You can write down your questions in the process. And then after the lecture, I will give answers. And also, if you will have any reactions, for example, if you like or if you can relate to what I say in the process, I will be happy to get your reactions. Now I will share my presentation. Please don't hesitate to write down your questions in the chat. If I won't be able to answer immediately, at least I will answer after the lecture. So you see my presentation, right?
Yes, we can see it, yes.
So why we are here today, I think we can start from this. So why we are here today? We are here today because all of us, we experience what is called chronic instability. And by chronic instability, we don't mean that the world used to be perfectly stable. of course, for many communities, especially those living under occupation, war, authoritarianism, poverty, or discrimination, instability has never been new. And many activists, human rights defenders, peacemakers, peacebuilders know that very well. But what feels different in recent years is the density and simultaneity of crisis. The difference is that we are not dealing with one isolated crisis followed by recovery. We are dealing, as I said at the start, with waves after waves of overlapping disruptions, wars, democratic backsliding, funding cuts, climate emergencies, etc. And for example, Freedom House reported that global freedom declined for the 19th consecutive year in 2024, with 60 countries experiencing a deterioration in political rights and civil liberties. And only 34 countries are improving. Another report, Civicus, also says that more than 90% of the world population now lives in countries where civic space is closed, repressed, or obstructed. And the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development reported a historic contraction in official development assistance in 2025. And it's a drop of 23%, so the largest annual fall in the history of official development assistance. So we are not talking about the one crisis. We are talking about the prolonged condition of uncertainty, and this affects our attention, our judgment, decision-making, relationships, strategy, and of course, our long-term capacity. And before we go to the resilience principles, I want to show why this conversation matters in terms of mental health of human rights defenders. So you see on the slide the numbers. It's the numbers from one of the surveys provided among 345 human rights defenders, and among these number of defenders, almost 20% of participants, they met criteria for PTSD. Almost 19% met the criteria for subthreshold PTSD, and almost 15% for depression. Trauma exposure, perfectionism, and negative self-appraisals were linked with the higher PTSD symptoms. But these numbers, they are not only about individual health, individual mental health. I believe that they reflect the reality of the field. It reflects the situation or the environment in which human rights defenders operate. And also, I think we need also to take into account that many activists not only suffer from mental health issues, they are also losing jobs, funding, institutional support, safety, predictability, and the sense of stable tomorrow. So when we talk about mental health here, we are not talking about weakness, about personal weakness, but we are talking about the human cost of working under pressure, under threat, uncertainty, and moral responsibility for a long time. And this is why nowadays resilience isn't about just cope better, just learn some practices, just use these tools. It has to mean building the capacity to remain clear, human, and capable of action without normalization, exhaustion as the price of our commitment. And previously we have we had the old model of resilience, and regarding to that model, the crisis was considered as temporary situation. We believed that you need to recover after the hardship, after the stressful event, and the main thing, the main instrument, the main approach to such kind of environments and situation was just coping, and resilience meant endurance. But as we have new conditions, new environments, it means that we need to change our resilience model as well. And what does it mean? It means that now we can't expect that the crisis will be temporary. We don't know. That's why we can consider this uncertainty as chronic. We need to learn to function in the process, inside all this environment, not waiting for recovering after. And the main thing, what we are talking now, what we are fighting for nowadays in terms of mental health for human rights defenders is agency. How to keep this agency, how to keep this fire, despite all the things which go around. And resilience is the ability to stay conscious and to make conscious choices. So the next part will be, we will talk about the hidden cost of this chronic instability. And the first hidden cost is chronic uncertainty fatigue. And why does it happen? To understand how does it work, we need to understand how our brain, our psyche is working. Uncertainty fatigue is the result of the mind's constant effort to predict the future. So the thing is that our brain is constantly trying to build the whole picture to use this picture for the next step to plan our future. For example, when we build an expectation, for example, that this stress situation will end in 2 days, and this stress situation doesn't end in 2 days, in that case, we experience frustration, right? And if this frustration repeats many times, several times, 10 times, 20 times, it can lead to depression, to loss of belief, to burnout, and emotional exhaustion. And also, I believe that it's dangerous to keep the opposite belief, that, for example, the belief that this will never end. It's also dangerous because it can take away our motivation, because our brain will decide, okay, if this will never end, why do I need to try to change something? Then I need just to give up. So that's why I believe that the most effective position here is the middle position. And the middle position means to remain open to different possible outcomes without attaching ourselves completely to either false hope or to total hopelessness, while focusing on what we can still do here and now. And that's why I put on this slide the quote often attributed to Viktor Frankl, that the first to break were those who believed that it would all end soon. Next were those who didn't believe that it would ever end. And those who survived focused on their actions without expecting what might or might not happen. And this chronic uncertainty fatigue, it attacks 3 fields of our 3 pillars of our sustainability. It's orientation. It's the sense when I no longer understand what's happening or where things are going. It's agency, It's the feeling like I feel like my actions aren't changing anything. And meaning, I begin to doubt the purpose of continuing. So then that's the consequences of chronic uncertainty fatigue. Another consequence is moral strain. I distinguished three consequences, and the second one is moral strain. So what is moral strain? So this is the pressure we feel when we remain deeply committed to what is right, but we repeatedly face realities that violate it. Many activists, many peace builders know this feeling. For example, you see injustice, you know what should be done, you feel responsible, but you are working inside political limits, you have institutional limits, your funding, you experience funding cuts or security limits, and your options are more modest than what needs to be done. And in that case, the pain isn't just psychological, it's moral pain that comes from caring, from our faith in humanistic values. And sometimes in such kind of situations, people think maybe I am weak, maybe I'm not resilient enough when they experience this moral strain. But often this pain isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign that your moral compass is still alive, that you still keep your beliefs, that you're still committed to your values. And the third one, the third consequence of current challenging situation is what is called political grief. This concept is a relatively new concept, and it came from the field of grief studies. It has been developed, among others, by grief researcher Darcy Harris, who used it to describe grief that arises from the events and losses which come from socio-political level. So when we talk about grief, usually we consider this grief as something personal. We think about personal loss. For example, the death of someone close to us. But grief can also arise when people lose something meaningful at the collective or political level. It might be, for example, safety, rights, trust in institutions, democratic hopes, sense of belonging, or future ones that felt possible. That's why political can be both individual and collective. It means that we can experience this grief on a collective level when some big change happens, and also on individual level when you have no one to share your grief with. And both moral strain and political grief, they can come from different reasons, and among them might be lives lost to war and violence, destroyed communities, cities, failure of international institutions, collapse of democratic hopes. So every time when something affects negatively civil society, humanistic values, or when we see another war, another conflict, we can experience both moral strain, moral injury, and political grief. Next, we will go to the resilience principles, 7 resilience principles. But I would like to ask whether you have questions or comments. If no, we can go further. So next I will share principles, 7 principles, which I created based on my small research, which I provided using interviews with different activists and human rights defenders. And based on that interviews, based on their practices and what worked and what didn't, I formulated these 7 principles. As I said, I'm not saying that all of them will be I know, useful or appropriate level for each human rights defender or activist, but maybe some of them will be interesting and useful to apply for our participants. So the first principle is make peace with uncertainty. And by this, it doesn't mean that you need to like uncertainty or you need to become passive, but it means that we should stop it means stopping the impossible demand that uncertain system must give us certainty, because we see that the world changes every day. The situation isn't stable. That's why we can't expect certainty from the uncertain environment. And when we live in instability, the mind naturally tries to understand what is happening. It tries to predict what will happen next. It tries to build future plans, or find a point of control. And in general, that's a normal survival mechanism. But the thing is to accept this uncertainty as part of our reality. And here I'm reminded of the quote, which is usually attributed to Carl Jung. And the quote is that a person's maturity can be seen in their capacity to tolerate uncertainty. So the difficulty here with uncertainty is that our mind likes closure. It likes the full, as I said, the full picture, the whole vision of what's going on. It wants to find answers to the questions. In psychology, there is an effect which is called the Zeigarnik effect. It means, this effect is about that unfinished or unresolved things tend to stay active in our mind. It means that we can't find the answer, or we experience a lack of parts of our whole vision. We try to find these parts and we try to make this picture whole. And we keep returning to them because the brain is trying to complete the loop. But in chronic instability, the system often doesn't provide enough information, enough data to close that loop. And we cannot fully close the question. We can't make an accurate forecast, and we cannot reach in unstable situation. We cannot reach the feeling. Now it's clear. Now I understand. Now I see the whole picture. And why do we need this certainty? Why do we experience the sense of a bit anxiety when we don't have this full picture? We need certainty because we use it as a basis for our future, for the planning, and we need certainty to keep to have some sense of control. But in unstable, if the environment can't give us this certainty, what can we do? We can switch from certainty to what is called orientation. Orientation means the position inside reality without the illusion of control. And orientation is when you see the limits of your knowledge, of your opportunities, funding limits, etc. You distinguish what is under your control and what is not, and then you can plan your next step. Okay, we don't see the whole path. We can't predict the future for the 5, 10, 15 years, But yeah, what can I do for today's evening? What can I do for the next week? What can I do in next 3 months? We can still plan our future in the smaller term horizon. And how can we how can we practice this orientation, switching from certainty to orientation? We can use, for example, this such kind of questions. You can do this exercise in writing. After the webinar, I think that we will share the presentation with participants. So these questions are, what do I know? So under pressure, as we said, the brain heightens threats, comes up with scenarios, mixes facts and fear. So you sit and write down, what do I know for sure? And then you check the facts. The second question, what remains unclear? And this question helps us to define the limits of what is unknown. It helps to reduce internal pressure and stop our need to figure everything out. What is still mine to influence, to control? What still I can do, and it will have this or that influence. You can write down which actions, which events, which words, anything what you can do to have a small influence or impact. And what is based on all of this analysis, you can think about what will be the next step in your position. So the next resilience principle, develop new scenarios. So when we have only one scenario in unstable situation and unstable environment, it means that we are in a quite fragile position. So control works. Otherwise, it's like the situation when if you have one scenario, it's like they say, when you put all the eggs in one basket. So control works well when the environment is linear, when the actors are predictable, when rules are stable. But nowadays, all of us, we understand that it's not possible. So that's why when we depend on one outcome, one role, one path, we become fragile, and in that case, our scenarios, the only one scenario won't work. That need to have plan A, B, C. So we should have different scenarios. In option often looks like over investment in the one strategy, one campaign, one way of working with authorities, with people, communities, identity fused with one role. For example, if this fails, I fail. Dependence on the one political or institutional outcome. So what can be done? We can do this exercise. It can be done individually or collectively with your team. It's practice building optionality. So first you identify fragility. You ask yourself or your team, where are we dependent on one path, one strategy, one role, or one outcome? Then think about alternatives. If this path will be blocked, what are the two other ways to act? It will require from the team or from individual creativeness and looking for new ways. Then try to expand your role. Who I am beyond this one role. And here you can list 2-3 additional roles you already have. Fourth is protect meaning. If the outcome doesn't happen, what still remains meaningful? And then you can define your next move. If this fails tomorrow, what I do next week. So the next resilience principle is invest in leverage points. From one side, it sounds a bit abstract because we know in unstable environment it's not possible. It's not possible to find easily that high leverage point, and sometimes we only understand which actions were of high leverage only after later. So before we even find the perfect leverage point, the first task is to stop pouring our energy, wasting our energy, our efforts into actions that consume us but don't change much in our situation. And in activist reality, I created a table with the examples which I get also from activists I worked with. Here are the examples of how do we call wasting of energy, the examples of low leverage actions. It's reacting to everything, arguing with roles, raising awareness without a clear aim, carrying someone else's responsibility, confusing visibility with influence, having no stop rule for yourself to prevent burnout, working through self-sacrifice. Also, this is an action which leads to burnout. It doesn't mean that these actions are useless. No, it doesn't mean that they are useless, but it means that sometimes we need to refuse these actions if we find out the new one of high leverage. And to help ourselves with this, to find these high leverage actions, we can provide, as I call, leverage audit. So in such table, from the left, you can write down, for example, 5, 10 of your tasks, loads, roles, activities, and then you you put a number, how much energy it requires from 1 to 5. Then you write down how much effect it gives back, and is it leverage point or no. It doesn't mean that we always need to do only actions which have high leverage effect, because sometimes, yes, we do some actions which doesn't have high leverage now, here and now, but they will have a cumulative effect, and they will give in the future, they will give good results. But we use this leverage audit not for just deleting the actions with low leverage, but for conscious choice of actions which you would like to use. Another resilience rule, it's about that we could not lose our meaning if it doesn't meet our expectations. And here we need to clarify that outcomes matter. In peace work and human rights work, results are not abstract. They can mean safety, dignity, freedom, justice, etc. But the thing is that there are too many factors which affect the situation, and even if you do your best, it means that some actors, they can interrupt, and it won't allow you to achieve the desired outcomes. That's why the principle here, results matter, but they cannot be the only source of meaning. But then if we can't take meaning from the outcomes, where we can take it from? And for that question, we can use different options. We can take this meaning, this sense of meaning, from capacities we build, from roles we play, from values we embody, truth we preserve, people we protect, dignity we refuse to abandon. In many cases, we are not able to achieve the final goal, For example, we can't achieve immediately the gender equality or stop all the wars, but we can provide campaigns, we can attract people to our movements. We can change for better lives of, I don't know, tens of or thousands of people. So the thing is that if we can't take meaning from the final results and outcomes, we still can take meaning from the small influence, if we have it, small influence, and our values, our commitment to what we do. There are many ways of finding the meaning. And what are common, what we call meaning mistakes? I distinguished here 4 meaning mistakes. First is measuring meaning only by visible success, and this means believing that the work mattered only if it produced a clear, immediate, and visible result. Second is turning strategic failure into identity failure. This means interrupting the failure of campaign, tactic, or plan as proof that you personally are a failure. Third one, making partial impact invisible. It means overlooking the smaller but real effects of the work, such as strengthening people, relationships, knowledge, trust, or future capacity. And also, the fourth one is letting oppressive systems define the meaning of our work. And this means allowing the system's resistance, violence, or refusal to change to decide whether our struggle had value or not. And practically, what can we do with if we have a crisis of meaning? In that case, we can do, as I also individually or collectively, this exercise. It's 5 steps here. First, we write down outcome. What result was I hoping for? Second one, control. Which parts of this outcome are outside my control? We can name here those factors which interacted. Third, values. Which values we kept and are still keeping? Which values are the motivation, the fire, the engine for our work? Roles. What role am I playing in the larger struggle? And examples: witness, protector, bridge builder, educator, strategist, memory keeper, stabilizer, and capacity. What has this work strengthened? It might be concrete help to people, to networks, memory, truth, trust, skills, or future action. And another resilience principle is avoiding total exposure. So I believe that this is what can be related to many activists in human rights and peace work. We often feel that we need to know everything. We need to follow everything and stay constantly updated. That's why we read news. We're always in touch with other activists and human rights defenders. But constant exposure to disturbing information has its cost, because it can increase our anxiety, our sense of hopelessness, our emotional exhaustion. And of course, from one side, being informed is important, but being permanently exposed isn't the same as being effective. And it may lead to secondary trauma and to rising of stress level. And what we can do in related to these principles. Here I suggest to divide the information into 2 groups. One is action relevant information. The second one, anxiety driven information. what is action relevant information is the information that changed your decision, risk assessment, your response, and strategic next step. And anxiety-driven information is information which is consumed to reduce uncertainty, to feel temporarily in control, and avoid the discomfort of not knowing. So we need to avoid this second group of information. For example, if we feel bored or we feel anxious, take the phone and look for news and read news, or to connect with other activists, knowing that you can get not optimistic news isn't the best decision. If you feel bored or if you feel anxious, the more effective way will be to calm down, to do, I don't know, some techniques which help to normalize our physical and psychological state. And only when we are ready when we feel ourselves in a good shape, then we can use this information and use this directly for next action, for decision. In general, this principle means conscious consuming of information. Just being conscious, because when we unconsciously consume all this information, it leads, as I said, to rising of stress levels, to anxiety, to burnout, and in many cases to secondary trauma. For example, when we read about cruelty, about violence, or when we see these violent scenes, it doesn't help us in terms of our work, in terms of our strategy, but it only harms our health. And another important resilience principle is related to connections. Connections, of course, they are important. We use connections for caring, for sharing, for development of our work, and we need connections. But from other side, we need to more conscious approach to the connections. And in general, we can divide our connections in through groups. So one is nourishing connections. First, we should ask ourselves, who helps me become clearer, steadier, and more human? And when you find this kind of connection, these connections should not be accidental. They need to be protected deliberately. Another one is operational connections. For example, if you belong to a small organization, to any organization, and it means that you don't need to know everything about the situation. In that case, we need to structure operational connections. What we need to do in practice: clarify who needs what information, define roles, who monitors, who verifies, who decides, who acts. Separate urgent information from general updates, use summaries instead of constant raw information flow, and make sure not everyone has to carry everything in real time. And here is the question: what information do I need for my role, and what should be held by someone else? And then you can distinguish this information, divide this in the part which you should know, and the part which is not obligatory to know. And contagion connections. Contagion connections, these are connections that mainly transmit panic, guilt, urgency, conflict, or emotional overload. And we know sometimes there are websites, there are groups who try to distribute this anxiety and panic among people. And first, we need to understand which connections belong to contagion connections, and what we should do: mute or limit access when possible, check them at defined times, not constantly, not continuously, Ask whether the channel changed your action or only changed the level of your anxiety. Move unclear urgency into clear roles and decisions. Leave, filter, or redesign channels that repeatedly spread chaos. And here is the question: does this connection help me act better or only keep me activated? So it's important to be conscious about our connections. Which of them are nourishing for ourselves, which of them help us to operate, and which of them are harmful for our mental health. And in that case, we need somehow to redesign to limit their access to us. And the seventh, resilience rule is about political grief. We touched this topic at the start. That's why I decided that it's important to make a separate rule, resilience. So it's about political grief. So political grief can show up in different ways. It might be numbness, constant anger, cynicism, loss of faith in people, inability to feel small, to celebrate small victories, exhaustion that feels deeper than ordinary tiredness. And often people don't recognize this as grief. They may think, I'm just tired, I'm becoming cynical, or I just lost motivation. But sometimes what is underneath of this state is unprocessed political grief for people, grief for communities, for hopes, principles, futures that were harmed or destroyed. And this grief needs space. Not endless rumination, but recognition and maybe discussion with specialists or among colleagues or friends. And for working with political grief, I named here only one practice. You can do it, as I said, individually or collectively. And this practice consists of 4 steps. First, witness, where you can name what has been lost, what was harmed, destroyed, betrayed, delayed. And you can write down, I'm grieving the loss of. If you do it in group with your colleagues or friends, first you write down and then you can share with your peers. Then the second part is grieving. Give the loss a moment of recognition. What feeling is present? It might be sorrow, anger, helplessness, disbelief, numbness, even anxiety. What future or possibility am I grieving? And then you write down this matters because. Then you separate, third part, separate grief from responsibility. What was not mine to control? And this part is important because sometimes we take responsibility for that actions which weren't under our control. So this separation needs to avoid sense of guilt. What remains mine to carry responsibly? And here you write, I couldn't control, and you write down that, but I can still do this and that. And then carry forward. Choose one form of continuation. Protect a value, tell the truth, support someone, build capacity, and then you write down, I will carry this grief forward by doing this, supporting those, preserving, etc. And there are different ways to create space for political grief. It can happen as safe, reflective spaces, collective debriefings, rituals of recognition, memorial practices, storytelling, art, poetry, conversations which help people to name what's going on and to share. And as I said, the important thing which help us to deal with this to operate in this unstable situation is art. As a practitioner, I can never underestimate the role of art in our life, and especially in the way how do we overcome hardship in difficult situations. And art, it might be sports, music, literature, I don't know, whenever you prefer. But in my case, I like poetry. Especially I like poetry, poems written by other activists. And when I've been preparing this webinar, I've been reading the poem of Maya Angelou, Still I Rise. And then I wrote my own poem inspired by Maya Angelou. And it is called Still We Stand. And I wanted to devote this poem to all the activists, human rights defenders, and peace builders. And I would like to read it. When storms arrive and shadows grow, when hearts are torn by fear and pain, we do not know which winds will blow, but still we learn to stand again. We carry grief, but not defeat. We bear the wounds, but do not fall. With weary hands and steady feet, we keep one hope alive for all. Not every war is ours to end, not every loss is ours to mend, but truth can live in what we do, and peace begins in staying true. Thank you. Here I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you for listening, for your reactions. Now we will have some time for questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Esset. And I'm here to help a little bit just to facilitate the questions. I see we have a couple that have come already into the chat. And just to ask everyone again, if you have questions, you can write them into the chat or also use the raise hand function, and we'll give you the chance to take the floor. The first questions that we have, the first one here is coming from Jürgen. He has two questions. The first one is about the problem of uncertainty, about which country will be attacked next. Sorry, it's one question with two parts here. But the second part is that there is also a bad certainty, for example, in Germany, which is quite aware of how fascism works and how it rises. But perhaps, you know, it may be too late to stop. Are there techniques that work for uncertainty that also work for bad certainty of knowing when something bad will happen, when we are certain something bad will happen? So that's the first question. Would you like to take that, or should I read a couple questions and then you can answer them? What do you prefer here?
No, I would like to answer this question first. First of all, thank you, Jürgen, for being with us and for your question. And second, yes, I believe that not only those practices, not only those exercises which I suggested, but all the exercises which help you or your colleagues to return back the sense of control, the sense of agency are useful whenever the conditions are. Because all of these practices, exercises, their outcome and their aim is to keep our mental health, and it means not to being so even if the situation isn't positive, isn't optimistic, even if in such kind of situation, to help us to keep this agency and sense of control. So I believe, yes, these, I'm not saying that these practices I suggested, they are ideal and they are relevant for any person. You can find in other practices which are more comfortable or relevant, but all practices which help to stay on your feet, to have a sense of control, and to keep your sense of agency, they are useful. They can be helpful in any conditions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esset. The next question that we have in the chat is coming from Daniela Fernandez. And it's regarding principle 7, which is the making space for for political grief. And how can we practice this principle within an organization when the organizational culture is so toxic, but the work still needs to be together for external aims?
Yeah, in such kind of situation, for example, if the culture, organizational culture is toxic, you don't need to provide this safe space or collective grieving with these people. You can provide the safe space with the people whom you trust and whom you know will be interested and will be involved. Because if you try to do this with as we call toxic colleagues, in that case, you will need good moderation, which will help to coordinate the process. And if it's not possible, if the, for example, management team won't accept your idea, then you can provide this with your friends, with your colleagues, with the other people who are interested and who can help to create this space. Because we can't force, right? We can't force organization or management of our organizations to do this if they are not willing to.
There is a follow-up part to that question, I think, that comes in from Daniela. She says, how do we restore trust?
It depends. On what do we mean trust in who or what. Because sometimes if we're talking about trust in the people or institutions or organizations which hurt us, which made some harm to us, in that case, maybe we should not to restore our trust. But if we are talking about the people or colleagues with whom we have chance to have nourishing connections, as we told during the presentation. In that case, the trust isn't built immediately for 100%. Trust is restored step by step. So if it's ruined, if it's distracted, you do one move, one action, and if you meet the understanding, the another action from other side, you, for example, restore trust for 5%. Then you do another action, another move, and if you still if your action is still encountered with the if your expectation is fulfilled, then you rebuild your trust on 10%. So I mean, in general, first we need to understand, to decide for ourselves, do we need to restore trust? Is it worth of it? And the second one, if we believe that we should restore this trust, then we can do it step by step, by small actions, words, moves, not immediately.
And thank you. The next question we have from Maria Teresa. She is asking for a bit of a further explanation on resilience point number 3, which sadly I didn't write down which was number 3 there, but I know you have it in the presentation.
Yeah, I think it was leverage in invest in leverage points. Yeah, when we talk about leverage point, it's about investing in the actions which gives us the good results. But the problem in unstable systems is the problem that we are not able to quickly find these leverage points. That's why we need to make research to try different actions. And when we find this leverage point, then we should invest in it. But before we find the accent, I wanted to make an accent when I talked about this resilience principle. I wanted to make an accent on the thing that before we find this leverage point, we should not waste our time, our efforts to the actions which don't gives us back not the energy, not the result, nothing back. And for example, when we have quarrels with trolls, or when we spend too much time reading news, or when we carrying someone else's responsibility. So before we find leverage points, we should not waste our time, our energy in the things, in actions which are not useful, which are not of much use.
Thank you. Also from Maria Teresa, she has asked if you can recommend any literature to read further about this topic.
About resilience.
I
resilience.
think it may be more generally about the overall the resilience. Yes.
In my case, when I've been preparing to the webinar, I used it was mostly in Russian, but I read books of Viktor Frankl, books about meaning, say yes to life, something like this. And another one was about systemic thinking. Because in the situation like this, in such kind of environment, the techniques like do meditate or do breath exercise, they are not working if we don't use systemic thinking. That's why I used this book. I will write down now.
Thank you, Esset. As you're writing those down, I will just read a couple other comments that we have. First, and excuse my pronunciation of the name here, but Simri says, even if we think an action is certain to fail against injustice, we have a moral imperative to act. Hope is a moral imperative. I think that's a very nice comment. A little bit further down from Daniela, we have overcoming uncertainty feels quite existential, so it was really useful to break down resilience into principles rather than just needing to accept it. So I think these are some really great comments as well. Do we have any final questions or comments before we close our session for today? I think as well we can just mention, yes, this session today is being recorded and will be shared. I think there is also a request, Esset, maybe to share your slides with the participants.
Yeah, I will share.
Otherwise, yes, I see a hand from Jürgen. We're giving you a chance to unmute here to ask your question.
I suppose being peace activist is like another work, even a little bit more stressier. So I suppose you would recommend that sometimes we disconnect completely. So if we are 2 weeks in holidays, we just don't look at the television. We forget about all without having bad conscience of being a traitor or of not thinking about the other people in the world and so on. But it's difficult. So the thinking comes back. And or even at night, the insomnia comes and you think about are there any hints about aside of the typical tricks to sleep well and stop thinking round?
If you have, for example, if activists have difficulties, for example, if they take holidays, but they still can't relax during these holidays and they experience insomnia, there might be a need for, there might be, as a reason for this insomnia, might be sense of guilt. Sense of guilt comes from the sense of greater responsibility when people consciously or unconsciously believe that they need to change the situation and over which they don't have control. And in that case, I believe the work with the sense of guilty might be effective. And as a consequence of working with guilt might be that the good sleep will come back. In terms of physical, it's in terms of psycho-emotional. In terms of physical, when we read news, when we work in human rights field, the level of cortisol is quite higher. Cortisol is the stress hormone, and physical activity helps us to decrease this level. So you can try before the sleep, for example, 1 hour walk or some another form of physical activity which is most appropriate for your situation. Thank you.
Thank you. It looks like we've had 2 additional questions that have come into the chat. One of them is maybe a bit more something for you to write follow up. Someone is asking if you have social media pages, perhaps where you speak more about this or where they can connect with you. And the other one from Daniela is what collective tools, keyword being collective, what collective tools would you recommend as opposed to individual ones? Mediation to grounding.
Yeah. It might be group meditation. It might be games like football, volleyball. I'm speaking from my experience because when we provided sessions for collective healing, such kind of activities worked very well. Also, it might be safe spaces. One of the most effective were safe spaces when you share your thoughts, your feeling, and you get validation of your emotions and feelings from your peers. It also works very well. So collective physical activity and also these practices, collective practices like safe space, sharing, meditation, group meditation, discussions. Well, the thing is that in case of meditation, safe space, group discussion, it will be good to have a moderator, to a facilitator who can help and lead the process.
Great, thank you. And I said, I don't know then if you have any social media links that you would like to share in the chat before we close. Otherwise, I think we are coming towards the end of our session for today. And again, we would like to thank all of the participants, but particularly thank you, Esset, for your expertise, your knowledge, and your suggestions, the tools that you have provided here. It is very important, Esset, I know in one of our other events, you said something that really inspired me and has stuck with me. You know, that we can't build with broken hands and broken wings, and that we need to make sure that we take care of ourselves as part of the movement. That you know, self-care and resilience is a part of the peace movement. So really, thank you deeply for everything you've provided, and we hope your message will also go beyond our call today and be shared widely with the activists who so badly need it in these difficult times.
Yeah, just one note that mental health is political. Care about mental health is also political. So don't underestimate this field. Thank you.